What it do, bruh? Talk of the town, Nintendo, Doc Trey still holding it down, still make the best games, and you know this, bro. It's the truth. If you don't like it, you can have that seatbelt.
So the PlayStation 4 Pro really kind of screwed over the PlayStation 5. So as you guys know, the PlayStation 5 comes out next year. The next Xbox is also expected to come out next year. But I really think that the release of the PlayStation 4 Pro kind of screwed over these systems before they even came out. Now, calm down. I'm not saying that these systems aren't going to sell. Of course, they're going to sell really well. But I think that the existence of the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X kind of screwed over expectations for these new systems. Now, going from a vanilla PlayStation 4 to this next PlayStation 5 is going to be power-wise a pretty big difference. But if you own the PlayStation 4 Pro and especially an Xbox One X, it might not be as impressive as it could have been had those devices not existed. Now, the PlayStation 4 Pro existed for two reasons. One is because there was rumors of a new Nintendo system coming out that was, according to rumors, could have been as powerful or more powerful than the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and they wanted to counter that. And two, and most importantly, Sony wanted to sell more 4K TVs. Now, the end result is Nintendo's next system was not as powerful as those systems, but they did sell more 4K TVs. So I guess that was a win for them. But because the PlayStation 4 Pro was marketed as a 4K version of the PlayStation 4, people expected the games to be native 4K, right? The end result is some were, most weren't, right? On the Xbox One X, there was more 4K native games, but not all of them were native 4K. Now, with the next systems coming out, with them being true successors to the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, people are going to expect these games to be native 4K, and because they're hyping up higher frame rates, native 4K and 60 frames per second. Now, the reason that's going to kind of screw with the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox is because of that expectation. Now, because when these games come out, no matter how good they look, when people find out some of them, a lot of them, aren't native 4K, people are going to trash them. Now, I'm telling you, just like I told you guys last generation, whether these systems can run these games 4K native and 60 frames on every game, it's not going to always happen because it's always going to come down to developer choice. There's always going to be developers that are going to pick higher end visuals over native resolution. Same thing that I told you guys last generation, or I told you that not all games are going to be 1080p 60 frames. Not all games are going to be 60 frames because it's up to developer choice. Now, could all these games be 1080p 60 frames and 4K 60 frames? Yes. But you have to remember that you have to sacrifice graphical quality for that to happen. All games on the Switch could be 1080p native and 60 frames per second if they wanted to. It just means the games are going to look worse. The Witcher 3 on the Switch could be 1080p 60 frames per second, but it probably also wouldn't have any of the post-processing effects and look a lot worse. It's all about the developer choice. Now, with them hyping up the 4K and the 60 frames per second or higher on these next-gen systems, if they don't hit that, people are going to be disappointed. Because you've already seen with this past generation that there's games that looked great. The graphics were great. People thought they were native 4K or thought they were native 1080p, thought they looked great, found that they weren't, and then all of a sudden they were less hyped for the game because it wasn't native 1080p or native 4K or really 60 frames per second. That's why I say that the PlayStation 4 Pro kind of screwed that up. Because had these systems not existed and we were just going from the vanilla PlayStation 4 to the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox One to this next Xbox, and that 4K 60 frames per second expectation wasn't there, there would have been room for them to really blow us away. Now, there are going to be games on the system, obviously, that look incredible and blow away games on these last systems. But because of that expectation being so high with the native res and the frames per second, a lot of these games, at least initially, probably won't look that much better than the Xbox One X version of a game, for example. Now, a lot of people have 4K TVs, but let's be honest here. The majority of people playing games are still playing on 1080p TVs. So there's even a lot of people that own a PlayStation 4 Pro that are still playing on a 1080p TV. Now, they can still get a better, slightly better image because the downsampling feature. But if they're aiming for native 4K and 60 frames, and these users are playing these PlayStation 5 games on a 1080p TV or even a 4K TV, they might not see as big of a difference as if the developers were not tied to that expectation. Now, people are going to say that I'm just trying to deflate the hype of the PlayStation, but I'm not. I'm telling you the truth, and I'm telling you what's going to happen. Just like when I told you guys in 2013 that the CPUs in the vanilla PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One were aimed at laptops and were trash. Everybody thought I was just pulling out of my rear. Look what happened with that. They are trash, right? But I don't know, man. What do you guys think in the comments section? I know a lot of people going to be hating on this video because they think I'm just talking crap, but mark my words, you guys are going to revisit this video in a couple years or a few years down the line and you'll be like, damn, that nigga was right again. And some of you guys probably still think I'm crazy, but look at it like this. Sony's example of how the PlayStation 5 is superior to the PlayStation 4 is how fast it loads a PlayStation 4 game. Let that sink in for a minute.
Okay, so first up, we have the IBM PowerPC 750 architecture, which is powering the Wii U. And in the other corner, we have the AMD developed Jaguar CPU that is going to be powering both the PlayStation 4 and the next Xbox. Now, first up, we have the clock speeds. The Wii U CPU is 3 cores at 1.24 gigahertz. PlayStation 4 CPU is 8 cores at 1.6 gigahertz. So the PlayStation 4 off the bat is clocked higher and there's more cores. Now, the PowerPC 750 has had a long history of having great performance per clock. But on the other side of the coin, if you actually do your research and look, the Jaguar core that the PlayStation 4 is going to be using, which is based on the Bobcat CPU before, has had very disappointing performance. It's not terrible, but it's not really that good. And these performance tests were actually done with Bobcat cores being clocked at north of 3 gigahertz, which is twice as fast as they are being clocked now. Now, the commercial Jaguar CPU that's going to be coming in the market on the PC end is only 4 cores. The one that's going to be in the PlayStation 4 is 8, which what they did was pretty much take both of those, 2 of those, and take them together. That's pretty much what they did. My only guess to why they did that is probably Sony. Of course, Sony knows that there's a deal with AMD and Nintendo for the Wii U. From what I can gather, they probably were like, hey, you know, how's that Nintendo CPU going along? And they're probably like, I mean, nigga, you know we can't tell you that, right? Them Nintendo ninjas, nigga, the Nintendo ninjas. And then Sony was probably like, oh, you know, come on, man. Like, okay, well, how about this CPU you guys got right here? Is it better than that one? And then AMD was probably like, kind of. And then Sony was probably like, what, nigga? What? Kind of? Double that up, nigga. Double that up, nigga. But according to my research, it appears that the 750 at the same clock performs quite a bit better than the Bobcat core. Now, the PlayStation 4 is going to use the Jaguar core, which is the pretty much the new Bobcat core, but out of AMD's own mouth, going from Bobcat to Jaguar only increases the performance by about 15 to 20% per core. So at the most, you got 8 cores, so at the most, that's under twice the performance. So if the performance wasn't that good to begin with, doubling it up isn't going to make it that much better either. I was looking at an article from Tech Radar, and they seem to believe that pretty much if the Wii U CPU was 8 core, like the PlayStation 4's, that the performance would actually be very similar. So it looks like the reason why the PlayStation 4 CPU can outperform the Wii U CPU for the most part is just because it simply has more cores. More cores and more cache.